Good morning. Still morning. Video good? So, hello. I'm here from the Debian project, and I'm here to help you guys. And hope I can actually follow up on that. I'm Maitland Bottoms, and again, from the Debian project, but before that, licensed amateur radio operator. My interest in radio has drawn me here inexorably. My interest in open source was maybe started by Phil Karn, who released his NOS code to the ham community, and just the idea of having distributed source code, I think made an impression on me and followed on to everything else I've done. So everyone GNU Radio has been based on people developing on Ubuntu boxes all the time. So there's packages for stuff, and you've probably found apt-get, if you're old school, new versions of things. That's been simplified. You only need to type apt. It's even easier to type. If you install something like GRCon17, it will pull in a lot of things. So I got the 470 package count from if you've got like a CH root environment that has like the bare minimum, all the things that happen when you install these things, GRCon17 and GNU Radio. And I'm assuming people want to take devices they have, plug it into their Debian box, and like listen to radio signals, get a waterfall. So Alex's GRCon is just awesome for that. This is instant gratification. I see people at ham radio things. I say, hey, you got a Debian box, so they're selling the AirSpies or RTL SDRs or something. Plug it in, run this, and they're listening to stuff right away. And then they can become GNU Radio developers. So there's a lot of stuff in there when you do that. You've got GNU Radio and Volk libraries. You've got support for lots of hardware. All the common things that I expect people to hear would have. And anything else that has a wonderful GPL or free software and open source drivers is all fair game. The idea in Debian is the big tent. It's the universal operating system. It should support every use case. So in getting GNU Radio into it, I started from the bottom up and said, well, let's look at what people might have in terms of hardware and put the hardware support in first so that then GNU Radio can actually do things once it's in there. And so I was going to do a nice thing where I took an out-of-tree module, made a package, and that would be a great workshop thing, but I'm here in the plenary session and no one wants to do the iChart and there's just too many details. You can bug me offline if you want to do this and package out-of-tree things. But I think people have discussed in the workshops, there's a few more things you might need to do. Actually, you can get GNU Radio and GQRX, but you don't have CMake yet. So Build Essential is a good Debian thing, has lots of compiling tools in it. CMake is how things are working now to build. CMake will generate make files, but there's Ninja now, so if people are working in GNU Radio core, want to try Ninja building, they might save time. Then when you're doing out-of-tree things, you're actually trying to interact with something else. So you've got some other library that you really want to use that's not already packaged in a block in GNU Radio, so you're going to want to apt install those or find some other way of getting those new features for new library features that you're going to do. So, and then the third thing is that there's like Volk and the FFT Wisdom tuning things that happen, and they've got helper applications, and they're packaged in these cryptic libraries that go along like our sort of a Debian idiom. So libffTW3-bin are binaries to help that library. libvolk1-bin are binaries to help your Volk profile tools. So I call them out here because they are sort of Debian packaging idioms. Debian library packages start with lib. They've got a library name in them, and they've got like a version. The idea is if there's a libvolc2, you can have libvolc1 and libvolc2 installed on your system at the same time, and that should ease your migration. But since we're all here, I'm going to keep it at the big level and not really bug people about all of the vagaries of developing things. So everyone's complaining about packages. So we've all heard this already. We're here, it's only partway through the second day, and we already know that packages are old. They're not the version you need. They're not built with the right options. They won't install on your system. And the software you need is not even packaged. And that packages and distributions are like this old school thing, and no one does that because the DevOps people say, no, the author pushes Git heads on GitHub, and people just run it from there as if by magic. So the other thing that I didn't even want to keep the font big, didn't even put on that slide, is how do you discover what's there? So one is I'm telling you that there's GNU Radio stuff in Debian, and I'll tell Josh that there's SOAPy stuff in Debian already packaged. You can do apt cache search on some keyword, and you can see what shows up relative to your keyword. There's also this new trend going called AppStream, and it's a way to kind of cross-distribution, determine what applications are there, what's relevant to the hardware you have and the things you're interested in. And so there's a place there to add screenshots, and I haven't done that, but I'm trying to help support the AppStream future. The other thing, when you app cache search on things, you also get all the Debian package names. So they're going to have things like library version numbers in them. And in the out-of-tree world, nobody actually does releases or version numberings and things like that. So some of the version numbers you may see are kind of me by fiat saying, well, I'm going to make it a version. And to give you the flexibility, I usually start out with 0.0. something so that you can release a version 0.1 that will be newer than whatever I did. Especially people that use date stuff, you know. I put a 0 in front of the 2017 for the HackerF guys in case they wanted to have a version 1 someday that was, you know, it could still be greater than version 2017. And so the other problem is that, well, the thing just was, it's so close. The package is so close, but you just didn't do something. So you can just apt source and see the source. You can edit the source. One of the things you should do is put a local changelog entry when you edit in your Debian changelog file. And then there's their deb build tool that will take all that stuff and you can deploy locally and you can quickly do your changes. It's really not so hard. I'm not going to sit there and type this live, but packages should not scare you. They should help you, and they should be tools you can use, including rolling your own. It's really not so hard, and there's lots of tools, instructions, examples, things up on YouTube. So many people can do it. There's a number of people in this community. They've got their own Ubuntu PPAs and archives. So, in fact, doing your own package repository is not so hard. The hard part is all about marshaling the code. The hard part is not this infrastructure thing. So, all the work that the Myriad RF team did for their PPA, actually getting the repository and packaging was the tiny part. The big part was this wonderful world of GNU Radio community we live in with all of its Git heads and making sure things build. So people are doing this, and it's great. It forms teams with shared experience. They get better software out here. And we see evidence of this so far this week, and we'll see it all week. So there's these other problems. So there's overhead. But a distribution actually brings some more opportunities. once you've gotten all your work of getting all your good GNU Radio stuff working, the distributions come in and they add a focal point. There's people in the distributions who do another license review. There's people who are forking distributions who have lawyers who really do license reviews, and they know how to file bugs against Debian saying, you've got some really bad licensing or something we can't distribute. So the distribution's a focal point for this, and this goes for, you know, Red Hat and Debian and Ubuntu. There are people going over these issues, code and suitability, and then there's so many distributions and so many things downstream from Debian that they depend on getting some of that stuff right. Then there's policy. So Debian policy is great, and Debian policy is not even the same as when I started doing this stuff. It's always evolving. And the DevOps people say, no, we're going to make our own policy. But in fact, policy is what allows these distributions to exist. It allows everybody to work together, and we actually have fewer conflicts because, hey, we can point to policy and we can say, if we do these things, then we can have co-installable software that doesn't interfere with each other. It installs cleanly, it uninstalls cleanly, it upgrades versions cleanly. So policy really should be our friend. And the other thing, the DevOps, they just say, well, we just push our stuff in that Ubuntu thing, but then there's Flatpak and stuff right to the users directly. But distributions have other teams of people who have other interests, and so there's translators hanging around. They don't generally hang around everybody's GitHub tree. They do hang around distributions. There's security bug fixers. There's build systems. Debian's building on a dozen architectures. So there's debugging tools, QA and monitoring, larger lifecycle support. I mean, people are doing Ubuntu long-term support because they provide that for us. So we do have some things we really depend upon. So Debian is a distribution, and Ubuntu is a distribution. You know, Red Hat has distributions. And so they're all this concept that's arisen from when Linux was released as to how to distribute things. And Debian's kind of unique. It's a community. In fact, one of the most succinct ways to put it is that the Debian project is an association of individuals who have made common cause to create a free operating system. That sets Debian apart because Debian is not a company. We don't have a corporate board. We are, in fact, an association of individuals who are motivated solely for our common cause, our belief in free software. But we do end up making a thing in our packaging ecosystem, and everyone says, oh, Debian is out of date, old, stodgy, they only release every couple of years. Ubuntu does it every 6 months. You know, why are you so bad? Well, there's sub-distributions in Debian, so it depends on kind of how you approach it, and I'm here to let you know some of these options. We've got unstable where all the new bits flow, and that's a continuous process. There's testing where things that don't have bugs in the first 5 days sort of migrate to. And in fact, I was at the Debian Developers Conference, and I found that I was kind of an outlier of doing so many things on having Debian stable on my laptop, is that so many of my cohorts are just actually using Debian testing. So then you've got a distribution that's really only a week or two old at any given time. So if you really want to keep with the bleeding edge, you know, that's the way to do it. But stable, again, gets all those fixes that security teams want and companies want to know what's on their system. And then when things change in the stable distribution, they backport fixes so that changes won't break things. And that's an important feature for a lot of people. So getting stuff into Debian, you track through this and can get the benefits of a distribution that you might not have gotten on your own. I need to apologize to the Kali Linux people because they fork right off of Debian testing frequently, and I let GNU Radio fall out of Debian testing, and so that caused some consternation. But I'll try to keep that so that Debian testing is always good in this community, and because there are just derivatives, and it's best to get it right kind of at the top of the food chain. We can interact with Debian. I don't get enough bugs, really. I haven't, the community has been very quiet, not saying that I don't have problems, so maybe I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't know what the answer is there. It has a bug tracking system, and things that aren't packaged get special bugs. You can request a package with an RFP bug. You can file it at bugs.debian.org, and people will look at that and say, hey, so-and-so knows about that topic. They might be interested in answering this request we had. And then Debian developers themselves intend to package things to avoid duplicate work. They say, hey, I intend to do this, so if you're going to do it too, we need to talk. So that solves the problem when there's something new that comes up. Everyone goes to package it on their own, and they're all just wasting, all but one are wasting their time. There's also all kinds of status and things on the web to track how things are. There's old school mailing lists and IRC, but Debian is meant not to hide problems, so interact. This distribution thing is everyone's concerned about getting their binary bits so you can run the stuff that you're doing anywhere. And so you've got a laptop, you don't want to compile GNU Radio on your laptop because that takes several hours. You just want to run a little flow graph with the RTL SDR. And so binary distribution lets you do that. And the apt tools and the depackage tools, there's a whole bunch that just lets you manage that. If you want to have laptops that you set up with lists of packages, you can do that. That would be good in education to just sort of have a common set of stuff and install, and then you can do virtual machines or given machines, and everyone sort of has the same software available. But the binaries is important to everybody, but it is all really about the source. We're here because GNU Radio releases its source code for all of you. And so the distribution is really all about an easy way to get the source to the end user, a source to people who review and audit, and a source for derivation and improvements. So there's a couple of other people that look at this. The Clang compiler was being developed, and they needed a corpus of code, C and C++ code, and whatever languages they support. And they just looked to Debian for the source archive, and they said, okay, if we're building a compiler, we'll just recompile all of Debian as our unit test. It's a big job. They had lots of money. They could spend up Amazon compute clouds, and they did awesome things. And then when things didn't work, they filed bugs. The Coverity people have got this great tool that you can go buy from them. But one of the ways they wanted to show that their tool was so good was they ran their tool on all of Debian. They filed bugs to improve the source code, but then that's just wonderful advertising for them. So GNU Radio and Debian is a natural fit. We're all people who value free software. So most of the ecosystem in GNU Radio is in fact licensed to uphold Debian free software guidelines. If you contribute to GNU Radio, expect to find yourself contributing to Debian. If you're a company and you're doing something that's an end run around these GPL things, then you need to be really clear about that so that we don't run afoul of each other. But in general, this is a natural fit. So you're all doing it. You should expect to be a developer for things in Debian because you're developing things in GNU Radio. So when I go to look for a package, there's really some important things, and there's a lot of GitHub things with GNU Radio-ish things that don't do a good job of some of the key things that I'm looking for. And one is credit where credit is due. You need to copyright your work. You need to say, hey, I did this, because you guys rock, you do cool things. You need to license your work, because if you don't say that we're allowed to distribute and copy it, then you're doing something proprietary. There's two things, right? Like, we're not going to just take your unlicensed work and put it into Debian. That wouldn't go. No one would let that happen. It needs to actually be licensed as free software. If you are doing stuff that is not free software, you really need to license your work so that you and your coworkers and stuff know, hey, this is my corporate property. So you've got to be really clear on this. There's a lot of stuff on GitHub that didn't do this. Then GitHub tried to convince people they needed to actually say something about licensing. So it's gotten a little better. So you have to state all that clearly. You're deriving because you've got source code, because everyone here is like giving stuff away and putting it up. So you need to credit others who work your derived. You need to comply with their licenses. So whatever they said to do, you should be doing. That's easy enough. Putting this in a file that somebody can read when they look at your GitHub, like some licensing file and copyright information as a summary, that's really super. Debian has like some automated machine-readable copyright formats that also may be interesting, especially if you get something really hairy and complicated that has 16 different contributors. But we all would not be here except for authors specifically licensing their code to allow sharing. So, release clearly. Here's something else that doesn't happen. How many GitHub out-of-tree modules have no tags at all? And how many of these people ever put up tarballs or email announcements saying, hey, I've got version 1.0 of my cool thing? Doesn't happen in this community. I'm here to tell you, I'd like to see this happen more. Release clearly. Early and often is a fine policy. Then if you're releasing often and Debian's out of date, then you can start yelling at us saying how out of date we are. But if you're never having a release, you can't really complain like that. So Debian, other distributions, archivists, they love tarballs on a public site. But we will settle for get release tags. There's tooling in Debian as a developer that I have that lets me see that automates this. So I hit a web page, and the web page says, hey, somebody put a new release tag on their Git tree. So there's stuff that happens if you actually make a clear release. You get bonus points for having a hash sum. It says when I downloaded this, yes, I got exactly the file that you intended me to get, and somebody didn't change it in between. Well, that's really cool. Cryptographic signatures on that, even cooler. If you may have noticed that UHD and GNU Radio have got cryptographic signatures, the .asc files that go with their tarballs. It's things I asked them to do to be leaders in the community, and I ask everyone here to follow that on. Here's something that I didn't get a question into Jonathan this morning, but CMake has a GNUInstallDirs, and I'm hoping that maybe that's old enough now that we can think about having it in the GNU Radio thing. All you do in CMake is do and include GNUInstallDirs. Hopefully we're not supporting stuff that's old enough not to have that. GNU Radio and all this is GPL licensed, and the Free Software Foundation has guidelines for packaging. And the GNUInstallDirs gives you all their namespace of where you put libraries and where you put shared common files and architecture-dependent files and your bin files. And CMake with the GNUInstallDirs has got these control variables. If you do this, you may not notice any difference when you do your normal build. But you've got these interesting CMake install hooks that will do things like multi-architecture support in various platforms, that even though if you're developing and you just type make, you don't see anything change, the Debian tools are actually setting those. And so the library paths become policy compliant by magic if you just have this in there. So I'm here to request that people do that. Jonathan can tell me if that's ready for prime time yet. Maybe we could get some of this into mod tool to actually put this into your boilerplate. And then the other thing is Debian is old school. We require man pages for everything that's in user bin. But yeah, keep doing all your other documentation. As it turns out, work done doing documentation often leads to successful outcomes. Maybe if not by you, but by somebody else or somebody who's learning something that just gets the clue they derive. So I need to repeat the pleas from Ben and Jonathan is that, documentation is important and should be part of what you're sharing with us. Otherwise, we might not know why we would care. So last year, I put up some of these qa.debian.org stuff to see the world from a maintainer's point of view. I'm not going to do that again here. Everyone who's interested can sort of look at it. The first URL's got bottoms as the developer. You can see everything I'm interested in, even if it's not a GNU Radio related package. And AEB is Andreas Baum, and he picked up a lot of the SOAPy stuff. So it turned out when I went to the Debian developers and see who's doing things, a lot of people are just interested in the GNU Radio community too. So it's not going to be just me. It's going to be several of us who all share these interests. Debian is all about making team things. Everything that was brought up about the GNU Radio organization and staffing and funding and we need volunteers to do this and that applies to Debian distributions, but I think Debian has a good, healthy approach and a good way to build teams. If you're interested in stuff, you can go to tracker.debian.org and look up a package that you care about, and then you can see what's actually happening. That may be enlightening. You can follow that to bug reports and all sorts of things. So with that, are there any questions?
All right.